If you do not want to make the same mistakes every beginner makes on their first knife, come with me and I will help you. This is a series where I will show you, from start to finish, how to build a knife the right way. Today I will show you how to make the handle for this knife. To start, I position the template on the wood block to define exactly where the handle will sit and to adjust the angle of the top side. With the template in place, I mark it and begin removing the excess material. First with a cut, and then on the belt grinder, where I refine this angle. Here I leave this face as flat as possible, because this is what will ensure a perfect fit between the knife and the handle. After getting as close as possible on the grinder, I move to manual adjustment. For that, I use sandpaper on a flat surface and keep correcting it until this face is completely flat. This detail makes all the difference in how the guard fits. With the face ready, I now mark on the block where the tang hole will be and what its angle will be. I make this marking on both the side and the top of the block to ensure alignment during drilling. On the drill press, I start by adjusting the entry angle of the drill bit, aligning it with the tang marking. I drill the first hole carefully, keeping everything aligned. Then I repeat the same process on the second line we marked. With the angle defined, I now focus on the depth. I remove the block from the support and, holding it in my hand, I deepen the hole until it reaches the necessary depth for the tang to fit. With both holes done, I begin removing the material between them. I do this by moving the block back and forth until the space opens up. After that, I move to manual adjustment. I use a tool that I made myself to open and refine the tang slot inside the block. Now I test the fit. I check if the guard is well seated against the face of the block and make the fine adjustments. This transition between the guard and the handle needs to be perfect. If you look against the light, there should be no gaps at all. With everything adjusted, I do a temporary glue up. The idea here is not to permanently glue it yet, but just to keep everything in position while we shape the handle. For that, I apply a release paste on the tang and on the guard. This prevents the knife from getting stuck in the block during this step. Then I prepare the glue using a 2-component epoxy and fill the inside of the block. I fit the block onto the knife and clamp the whole assembly firmly. Now I clean the excess glue, especially around the guard area. This cleaning needs to be very thorough so it does not affect the final finish later. And before the glue fully cures, I remove the handle from the knife. I remove the handle, clean everything well, and place it back in position until the glue fully cures. This way I ensure the block will release from the tang after the glue is completely cured. With the glue cured, I remove the tang from the knife and do a complete cleaning, removing all residue from the release paste, both from the tang and from inside the block. And that is it. Now I have a perfect fit between the block, which will be our handle, and the knife. This way, every time I remove and place the handle back, it returns to the exact same position. Now I secure the ricasso of the knife, which is our flat reference, in a tool to find the center of the block. With the knife positioned, I mark the entire outline with a pen. Then I flip the knife and repeat the process on the other side. This way I get the center line of the handle. Now I make some markings to start squaring the block. With a caliper, I mark about 13 millimeters to each side from the center. This gives me a symmetrical reference for both sides. With a ruler, I connect these markings and now I have a guide to square the handle. On the belt grinder, using a coarser grit, I remove material until I reach these lines, always being careful to keep everything straight. With that done, I now have both faces of the block aligned. Now I can mark the handle outline. To do this, I start by ensuring alignment with the guard. I use the template we made in the design and position it on the face of the block that will meet the guard. Now comes an important detail. I use a reference on the spine of the knife to make sure the handle does not go above the spine line. The handle should always sit slightly below it. With this reference defined, I position the template and make the marking. First the top side, then I adjust and mark the bottom side. Here I intentionally leave a little extra material. This gives me room for fine adjustments later. Now I remove the excess on the bandsaw. And then refine it on the belt grinder. On the grinder, I am especially careful near the guard area. The rear part of the handle I can leave almost finished, but the front part, where it meets the guard, I leave for manual adjustment later to avoid mistakes. Now I mark the width of the guard on the block. I leave a clearance of about 1 to 2 millimeters and make the markings. With a flexible ruler, I draw a line from the front of the handle to the end. Now I transfer this reduction in width to create the waist of the handle. I do this on both the top and the bottom. Then I connect these points with a smooth curve. And that is it. Now I have the tapered waist design of the handle. On the belt grinder, I start by removing the first straight line. Creating this initial tapered shape. The next step is to start forming the curvature of the handle waist. With the markings done, both on top and bottom, I begin connecting these points. I start from the bottom, grinding down to the line we marked. Then I flip the piece and do the same on the spine. The idea here is to align these 2 points and leave this line straight, because it will be our reference. I repeat the same process on the other side. Then I grind the curve toward the pommel and also toward the front of the handle. This way we create the base shape of the waist. Now I adjust the transition line of the handle curve. On the top, the reference is the center line we drew. On the bottom, it is the middle line of the handle, that raised line we designed. On the grinder, very carefully, I extend this curve toward those points on both sides. Here I go very lightly, just to create a reference. The final finish will be done later during manual sanding. Now I switch to a finer grit to remove less material and have more control. And I begin breaking the sharp edges of the handle. It is still very square, with hard corners. I make a marking of about 5 millimeters to have a reference of how much material I can remove. And little by little, I start softening these edges. With that, the handle already starts to take shape. Now I mark the outline of the guard on the handle, so I can round this area more accurately. I use the guard line itself as a reference, remembering that I leave extra material here, because the fine adjustment of this transition will be done manually later. I also mark the pommel design, defining the curve that I want. On the grinder, using a finer grit, I refine and round the shape, always being careful not to go past the markings. Now I move to manual grinding. Here I will apply a museum fit finish to the handle. For that, I wrap the guard with tape, creating a clearance of about 1 to 2 millimeters. With that done, I use a file to align the handle transition with this wider reference. I leave this area very flat. This ensures that the entire contour of the handle stays slightly thicker than the guard. I start with a coarser file to remove material, and then use a finer one to refine it. I keep checking with my finger, feeling the transition. Little by little, I do this around the entire contour. At this stage, I do not need to worry about the back of the handle. The focus here is only the transition between the handle and the guard. With that done, I remove the tape. And now you can see that there is a uniform excess of material around the guard. With a utility knife, I mark on the handle the exact position of the guard. Then I remove the knife, and I can see this line on the block. Now I create a chamfer in this area to soften the transition. I use a fine file and remove material little by little, always checking so I do not go past the line. Then I finish with a finer sandpaper. And this completes the transition finish. Now I slightly reduce the contact area between the handle and the guard. I remove a bit of material in this region. This creates a small pocket for glue, which helps with strength and alignment during the final glue up. On the tang, I make some grooves to improve glue anchoring. I do one final overall check. Making sure everything fits perfectly, and move on to the final glue up. Before gluing, I clean all surfaces thoroughly with a degreaser. There must be no dirt or oil residue. I glue the parts, clamp the assembly firmly, and carefully clean all excess glue. After everything is clean, I lubricate the blade and the guard and let it cure. With the handle permanently glued, I do a visual check to make sure everything is aligned. Now I use the holding tool again to drill the pinhole. I mark the exact position where I want the anchor pin. And in this case, I also drill a hole for a lanyard tube. On a knife of this size, I usually do not include this kind of detail, but here I will add it for demonstration purposes. I position the knife at the point where I want to drill the hole. Clamp it with locking pliers so nothing moves. And use 2 supports at the back of the handle, in the area that is suspended, to make sure there is no movement during drilling. After drilling, I perform the bonding using a cyanoacrylate adhesive. After everything is cured, I go to the belt grinder to remove the excess from the pin and the tube. Then I begin the manual sanding. For this, I protect the guard again with tape, but now with only 2 wraps, to reduce the level difference between the handle and the guard. With the guard protected, I start the manual sanding. I begin with a coarser grit, working first on the sides of the handle. I remove the excess glue around the pin and then start adjusting the area near the guard. I bring the wood down until it reaches the same level as the tape, which is our reference. I do this around the entire contour of this area. On the bottom side, I am careful to maintain symmetry between both sides. I use a strip of sandpaper in a back and forth motion, maintaining the transition line between the base and the side of the handle. I mark it with a pencil to have a visual reference and sand while respecting that line. Now I move to rounding the spine. And here is an important tip. Curved areas need to be truly curved. It is not just about softening edges. The goal is to create a continuous and uniform radius. I mark the point where the fingers sit on the lower part of the handle, and also where I want the curve transition near the guard. I check everything to maintain symmetry and mark the reference lines. With a coarser grit, I start removing material until I reach those lines. With everything aligned, I mark on the pommel where the rounded section ends. On the belt grinder, I start by breaking the corners up to that mark. Then I refine it until I get a uniform rounded shape. Next, I switch to a finer grit to remove scratches. And I continue the manual sanding, using progressively finer grits until I reach the desired finish. With the sanding complete, I apply wax to the handle to hydrate and add shine. I spread it evenly over the entire surface and then remove the excess with a cloth. And that is it. This is the final stage of building this hunter knife. This is the final result. A light piece, well aligned and comfortable in the hand, though it also has a very beautiful pattern. If you have any questions, or if there is any detail you would like to see in more depth, leave it in the comments. If this helped you, leave a comment with your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions or if you think anything was missing, and don't forget to like and share.